Welcome to OOTO TV, the out-of-the-office investigation from the past into the future of personal health and actualization. This time we're discussing critical thinking with the 7 liberal arts, Trivium and Quadrivium. We're really investigating the sources today that show how this ancient framework is maybe a kind of shortcut to intellectual freedom, teaching you not just what to know, but really, fundamentally, how to think.
That's exactly right. That's our mission here. We've looked at material that champions the historical side, yes, but also, and this is crucial, the modern application of these 7 liberal arts. It's presented as the foundational system for critical thinking and for lifelong learning, too. And the whole system, it seems, perfectly structured to help you deal with today's information overload and, well, bias.
Okay, so for everyone listening, let's quickly set the stage. We're talking about 7 subjects, but they're not just a random collection of classes, are they? They're split into 2 very specific groups.
Highly intentional tiers, yes. First, you have the 3 subjects known collectively as the trivium. These are the arts of the word. They focus entirely on language, on logic, and communication. That's your base. Then, building on that, you get the 4 subjects of the quadrivium. And these are the arts of number. They're all about quantitative reasoning, pattern recognition, really seeing the structure underneath things. Together, they create this remarkably robust system for objective analysis.
Let's start with that bigger picture then, the 7 liberal arts as the actual tools of learning. I find that core idea really compelling, that historically these arts weren't subjects about something, but the means by which you could master pretty much any subject, the key to intellectual empowerment, maybe.
And understanding that requires a bit of historical context. When we talk about liberal arts, it's important to see how they were set apart from the mechanical arts back in ancient Greece and Rome. The mechanical arts were, practical. They resulted in a specific defined thing, an external product like a pot or a building.
Right, the focus was on making something outside yourself.
Exactly. The liberal arts, though, they were different. They were open-ended, and they were specifically designed to create a change inside the person, a profound internal change. Their goal wasn't a product. It was moral and intellectual excellence. They literally aimed to liberate the individual, giving them the cognitive skills to navigate the world, to choose their path, beyond just the immediately practical or familiar.
That historical distinction really hits hard when you think about some of the critiques of modern schooling. Dorothy L. Sayers made this point quite famously, didn't she?
Oh, absolutely. Her argument was powerful, that modern education often focuses too much on teaching subjects, the what, but fails pretty badly at teaching students how to think, the why and the how.
And that failure, it leaves people, vulnerable, doesn't it? If you're only fed facts but not taught how to process them, how to evaluate them.
You're just ill-equipped, especially for the kind of world Sayers saw coming, a world of massed propaganda, as she put it. If you only have fragmented subject knowledge, you can't really assess the messages bombarding you. The classical system, she argued, was meticulously designed to be an antidote, an inoculation against that kind of manipulation.
This sounds incredibly practical then, not just some dusty academic exercise. So how can this framework, this critical thinking with the 7 liberal arts, the trivium and quadrivium, how can it actually be applied in our modern lives today?
Well, that's a vital question for anyone listening, I think. The sources strongly suggest that exposure to critical thinking with the 7 liberal arts, trivium and quadrivium, improves your social skills and ability to share ideas and thoughts, precisely because it directly trains eloquence and persuasive communication. This system teaches you how to build a coherent argument, one based on evidence that other people can actually follow and engage with respectfully. Whether you're discussing finances or maybe a relationship issue or even strategy at work, gives you the tools.
That really reframes these arts, doesn't it? From old lessons to essential life skills. Okay, let's get into the specifics of the trivium now. Those first 3 roads, the art of the word.
Right, the trivium. This was really the first phase of classical education, sort of like the undergraduate grounding. And it's structured as a pedagogical progression, one that actually mirrors the natural stages of how we develop intellectually.
The first stage is grammar. They call it the what. I guess in modern terms, you could see this as the information gathering stage, but it sounds like it has to be done really carefully.
Extremely carefully. Grammar is about collecting the knowledge, the data, the information. And the absolute rule here, the mandate, is that it must be done without prejudice or bias.
Yeah.
Just the facts. It's about establishing those basic rules and facts first, answering who, what, where, When? You see this mirrored in what Sayers called the poll parrot stage of childhood, where kids are really good at memorizing facts, soaking things up.
Okay, so once you have the raw facts, unbiased hopefully, then you move to logic, also called dialectic. This is the why. So this is where you start actually working with the information.
Exactly. Logic is the essential study of reasoning.
Hmm.
It's where you move from just having data to achieving real, genuine understanding. It's the processing center. You're sorting information, you're analyzing arguments, looking for contradictions, eliminating them, validating conclusions. The big question here is, why? And this lines up pretty well with the PERT age of youth. When young people naturally start questioning everything, challenging ideas, wanting precise definitions, they're moving from just repeating things to actually processing them.
And then the final stage of the trivium, the one that sort of pulls it all together, rhetoric. The how. This is where thinking finds its voice, right?
Rhetoric is the capstone, yes, the art of persuasive reasoning. But it's really important to grasp that you can't master rhetoric properly without fully integrating grammar and logic first. You need to have logic-based thoughts, which themselves have to be built on solid factual premises from your grammar stage before you can express a thesis effectively, persuasively, and ethically. This aligns with what Sayers called the poetic age, where the student is ready for more independence, wants to make a creative, coherent contribution, wants to express their own well-reasoned views.
It's really clear the system is designed as a kind of defense against, well, sloppy thinking. You mentioned earlier that sources suggest we've shifted into a more emotional-based culture.
Yes, that's a key point raised. When people skip or short-circuit those first two stages, grammar and logic, they tend to let feelings or pre-existing beliefs dictate their conclusions, which is risky.
So what are the key elements then, specifically for critical thinking with the 7 liberal arts, Trivium and Quadrivium, that address the challenges of that emotional-based culture today?
It's the structured methodology itself, really. Gather data, analyze, data express, explanation. That progression, that discipline, is the direct antidote to mental shortcuts. Things like confirmation bias, where you only look for evidence that confirms what you already think, or cognitive dissonance, that uncomfortable feeling when you hold contradictory ideas. The trivium demands objective validation before you get to the expression stage. You're listening to OOTO TV with research by author Paul Bulow. Welcome back. We've talked about the arts of the word, the trivium, that foundation. Now we need to get into the second tier, which feels maybe less familiar to some people, the quadrivium. The 4 roads of number and pattern. This is where the training seems to shift quite significantly from language and logic to, well, abstract reasoning. Oh, the shift is absolutely intentional.
Yeah.
And profound. The trivium gives you the essential tools for language and argument, right? But the quadrivium provides let's say, the quantitative framework for analyzing objective reality beyond just words. It focuses on quantitative reasoning, yes, but also on discerning patterns. Patterns in the cosmos, in reality itself. It's explicitly designed to train your intellect in abstract thinking.
Okay, the 4 subjects listed are arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. Why exactly those 4? What's the connection?
They're organized very logically based on how they relate to quantity. You have quantity that's discrete, like individual numbers, and quantity that's continuous, like magnitudes or shapes. And then you study these either at rest or in motion.
Okay, walk us through that, starting with the discrete quantity.
So arithmetic, that's the study of discrete quantity itself. Pure numbers, sort of detached from anything physical, just number properties. Then second, you have geometry. This takes that discrete quantity, numbers, and applies it to space. So it becomes continuous quantity or magnitude shapes. Geometry is a really crucial step connecting pure abstract numbers to, well, 3-dimensional reality. It demonstrates pattern in space.
Okay, so geometry is the bridge from the purely abstract number to the world we see and touch. Makes sense. But then music. That one feels like maybe the odd one out in a math group.
It only feels odd if you think of music purely as like performance art today. Historically, music, or more accurately, harmony, was seen as a mathematical study. It was about ratios and proportions, but applied to time and interval. Continuous quantity in motion, essentially. The beauty people heard in music. That was considered the audible proof, the manifestation of perfect mathematical ratios, order you could hear.
Fascinating. Okay, so arithmetic, number, geometry, number in space, music, number in time, which leaves astronomy, linking space and time.
Precisely. Astronomy, or cosmology, as it was often understood, is the study of numbers in both space and time. It was considered the absolute pinnacle of the liberal arts. Why? Because it was meant to reveal the profound wisdom, the rationality, the the beautiful order that governs the entire cosmos. So the quadrivium as a whole, it acts as this bridge. It's designed to pull the student's mind away from just changeable sensory things towards understanding the immaterial, the universal, the things that don't change. And it does this by teaching you to discern proportion, the underlying sameness of ratios, and recognize these fundamental patterns everywhere. The idea that math is actually required to truly understand the structure of the universe, that's quite a powerful thought. It really is the defining insight of the quadrivium, isn't it? And that's why one of the key takeaways is that critical thinking with the 7 liberal arts, trivium and quadrivium, is required to understand the world through observation and interactions, because the quadrivium teaches us to see the mathematical order and proportion that undergirds the cosmos. We're meant to perceive that order.
And that deeper, more rigorous understanding of order then feeds back into how we communicate, how we express ourselves using the trivium skills.
Let's circle back to rhetoric for a moment, but focus on its pedagogical nature, what the Greeks called paideia, the cultivation of rationality in speech, the logos.
Yes, this is the application phase, praxis, where your intellectual mastery actually becomes visible in what you do, how you communicate. The sources highlight some really specific rhetorical activities that were used in the classical classroom to build these sophisticated critical communication skills.
What kind of practical exercises were they using to build that intellectual muscle?
Well, one key practice was something called interpretive reading. Now, this isn't just, reading words off a page mechanically. It involved explicitly teaching the mechanics of public speaking through reading aloud. Things like using correct breaths, strategic pauses, altering your voice, all to fully transmit not just the author's ideas, but also the underlying feeling, the sentiment. The student learns to become an effective, nuanced conduit for complex thought. And then there was that high-pressure exercise you mentioned earlier. Impromptu speaking. Sounds terrifying.
Maybe a little. But it was designed specifically to train mental agility. Students would get a topic they hadn't seen before, maybe only 30 seconds or a minute to prepare, and then they had to deliver a short, organized talk on it. It's pure exercise for the flexibility and speed of thought you need for quick-witted reasoning, and for organizing your thoughts effectively under pressure.
And probably the most important application, bringing all the arts together. Argumentation and debate.
Absolutely crucial. Debate forces you to integrate everything. Grammar, getting your facts straight, logic, analyzing arguments, spotting fallacies, and rhetoric, presenting your case persuasively. It makes students evaluate evidence, hopefully impartially, distinguish logical flaws quickly. And it really develops what you might call cognitive apprenticeship skills learning by doing, through that rigorous back and forth of opposing arguments.
And that rigorous practice, it leads directly to social benefits too, right? Not just individual skill.
Oh, definitely. The sources argue that critical thinking with the 7 liberal arts, Trivium and Quadrivium, reduces conflicts and helps to build consensus by cultivating empathy and forcing the limitation of egocentric thinking through the process of argumentation and debate. I mean, think about it. When you genuinely have to argue for a position you don't personally hold, maybe one you even disagree with, you have to step outside your own perspective. You start to cultivate empathy and maybe recognize that there can be validity in different viewpoints, even if you don't ultimately adopt them.
You're listening to OOTO TV with research by author Paul Bullo. Okay, as we start to pull this all together, synthesizing the value of the trivium and the quadrivium. It seems the ultimate goal is forging these intellectual skills that are universally transferable. And this directly addresses something the sources called that distressing fact. That someone can be an absolute master in their own specialized field, but show basically no better judgment or critical thinking ability in any other area of their life. We've all seen that, haven't we?
We have. And that capacity for transferability, that's exactly why this whole framework feels so relevant, surprisingly relevant perhaps, to the modern job market. Employers today are constantly talking about needing human skills or soft skills. There was data mentioned suggesting, 89% of failed hires lack these essential soft skills. Skills like asking good questions, reading critically and reflectively, solving problems creatively, exercising independent judgment, analyzing data without letting your bias run wild. These are exactly the skills that mastering these 7 arts is designed to teach.
Okay, I need to pause here, though, and bring in a bit of that, well, necessary skepticism. Because, let's be honest, many critics today look at this whole classical education model and they see something that's, frankly, outdated, maybe rigidly traditional, or worse, something that was historically only for the elite, the privileged few. So, can critical thinking with the 7 liberal arts, Trivium and Quadrivium, truly scale for the vast majority of people today? Or is it, at its core, fundamentally elitist?
That's a completely fair challenge, and it's one the sources acknowledge, at least implicitly. Because historically, yes, access was incredibly limited, often to the aristocracy or clergy, no question about that. However, the argument made now is that the value of achieving these transferable skills, this critical judgment, it's arguably more essential for everyone today than it ever was before, precisely because we are all, every single one of us, drowning in information, constantly targeted by mass propaganda, facing incredibly complex global challenges. So the hurdle isn't necessarily the content itself, you could argue. The content, the ability to think clearly, is vital for a functioning democracy and effective citizenship for all. The real challenge, the difficult part, is figuring out how you scale up a system that is inherently demanding. It's methodology-driven. It requires really skilled teachers, often smaller class sizes, for things like debate. But the core benefit, developing that intellectual capital, that ability to think for yourself, the sources strongly imply that must be prioritized for anyone who wants to participate fully and effectively in our complex world. It shouldn't be seen as a luxury.
That reframes it powerfully. Intellectual competence as a necessity, not just a nice to have. Okay, for our final insight. Thinking about everything we've explored, the logic, the number, the patterns, the communication, what would you say is the absolute most challenging cognitive requirement that this entire system places on someone trying to learn it?
The most challenging cognitive requirement. I think it has to be the demand for total psychological flexibility. It's this. The process of critical thinking with the 7 liberal arts, Trivium and Quadrivium, requires the ability to hold multiple conflicting thoughts and ideas simultaneously, while allowing an inner dialogue to sift through the evidence to come to the most likely conclusion with the available data and experience you have today, while you may add more data as time passes and can change your mind from further critical thinking and evaluation. That constant readiness, that willingness to be proven wrong by new evidence or better logic, even while you're rigorously defending your current best understanding, that's incredibly difficult. It requires humility. But it is perhaps the highest form of critical thinking this system cultivates.
Wow. That demands immense humility, as you say, and discipline. But the potential reward is huge. Maybe seeing the world and yourself a bit more clearly. It really brings us back full circle, doesn't it, to that powerful ancient goal you mentioned for the quadrivium, especially astronomy moving the mind towards contemplating the admirable order and harmony of the cosmos.
It does indeed. Perhaps the highest purpose suggested by the sources for mastering these arts isn't just accumulating knowledge or even just sharpening skills. It might be about cultivating a sense of wonder. Wonder combined with the objective ability to actually perceive and appreciate the truth and beauty that is objectively present in the world's underlying structure. When you grasp the patterns in language, the mathematics governing the stars, you're equipped not just to analyze, but maybe to thrive as a rational, liberated, and perhaps even awestruck being.
A wonderful thought to end on. Thank you for guiding us through this really challenging, but ultimately, yes, quite liberating investigation into these ideas. And thank you, our listeners, for joining us for this OATO TV investigation.